What's up, champs? In this video, I'm gonna share 7 books that I believe every single man should read to help you dominate life. Listen, these are books that I've personally read that have helped me level up in business, with my finances, with dating and women, with just communicating with people, and also just becoming more self-aware and understanding how to live out my purpose. And so at the time you're making this video, I'm 32 years old, and so you're gonna notice that I'll be sharing at what times in my life I read these books. And so it'll give you some perspective, share why I read certain books, and the best takeaways that I've gotten from certain books as well. And so with that being said, let's get to the action. Book number 1, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I believe this should be required reading, to be honest. Like, whenever I have a child, son or daughter, this is one of those books that they have to read. Even in grade school, I believe this should be required reading for people in grade school as well, because it really helps you understand how to communicate with people. It explains how to, just be able to build relationships, build connections with people. And I believe this is one of those books where it's not so much about just building friendships. I believe when you're able to connect with people, it helps you in all areas of life. It helps you, in what area of your life do you not need to know how to connect with people? In your relationships, whether it be with your partner, you got to understand how to communicate with your partner, right? With your children, you got to understand how to communicate with your children. When you're in business, you got to know how to communicate with your prospects, with your team members, the people that are working for you, the whole nine. Well, let's say you have a partnership. You got to know how to communicate and network and just connect with them as well. And so I believe this book right here is like legit required reading. I think I read this I'm 32 years old now. I think I read this maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a book that I revisit every now and then just to kind of, sharpen up, because sometimes what'll happen is you read certain books and, then you kind of grow, and then you come back and read the book again, and then you start to see things that you didn't see before, because it just wasn't relevant to you at that time. And so I'm one of those people, like, when I first started reading books, believe it or not, when I went to college, I hated reading. But after I got out of college and really went full-fledged into business, that's when I started reading a ton of books. And I was just reading every single book I could find. But now I'm more of an advocate of reading books that pertain to the situation that I'm in right now. And so as I'm sharing these different books with you, you want to think about where are you at right now in your life. Is communicating and connecting with people something that's really important to you, because you don't want to burn a whole lot of time reading books that are not relevant to where you are right now. And so this is the first one, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You cannot go wrong with this book. Like, this is mandatory reading. Book number 2, The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. Man, this book right here, whenever I think about this book, this book really transformed my life. This book really helped me when I was going through some really hard times. I had become a ambassador in this network marketing company, MLM company back in the days. It was called Body by Vi, and I was one of the youngest 6-figure earners in the company. I became the model, the fitness model for the company. Like, they had me on their brochures, and when people would call in for customer service, they would hear me in the background while they were waiting on customer service to pick up. And so life was amazing. Life was great at that time. But what ended up happening while I was in that companies like this, there's other MLMs out there. They have influencers who speak to the entire company on like phone calls and at events and things like that. And Grant Cardone just so happened to speak to us. I remember like yesterday, I was sitting on the couch just listening to Grant Cardone talking to everybody, and he started talking about this book. And so, what he was talking about was good enough for me to go ahead and buy the book. So I bought the book, and it came in the mail, and I never read it. But I want to say maybe close to a year later, my business in the network marketing company started kind of going backwards. Like, I think it's just the nature of business. Sometimes you go backwards, and it got really, really tough for me. and like really financially. And so it got so bad to the point where I had to ask my pops for a $250 loan. And I literally had less than 30 days to make enough money, and so that I could pay my bills, so that I could pay my rent, so that I could pay my car note. At the time I had a M6 BMW convertible, $750 car note. Car insurance was like $350, you know, paying for food, gas, all this kind of stuff, right? And so I needed to make some money quickly because the MLM company had kind of went backwards, and so I wasn't making money from there. And so I jumped back into personal training, but during that time, I don't know what made me pick this book up, but I picked up the book. It's like a freaking, whenever I think about it, it's almost like something out of a movie scene. I picked up this book and I started reading it. And as I was reading the book, what's so crazy is I started tearing up. Like I'm literally tearing up and almost not necessarily crying, but I'm tearing up as I'm reading it. And this book, I can't explain it, but it just lit a fire up underneath my butt. Because when I asked my pops for that $250 loan, one, I went and spent some money on some honey buns and ramen noodles so I could eat. I put some gas in my car, and then I spent some money on somebody to develop like a flyer design for me for my personal training flyers, because I jumped back into personal training. And then I spent the rest of that money on printing those flyers. And then from there, I just hit the city out here in Atlanta. You know, you got Lenox, Phipps Plaza Mall, Whole Foods, and I started passing out flyers to people to get clients. And I want to say a little under a month, maybe about 25 days or so, 24 days or so, I racked up enough cash to relaunch my fitness business. And this book really shifted my mindset and perspective, and it really just gave me a sense of urgency. And this is something that I don't hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, but you gotta have a sense of urgency whenever you're trying to build a business, whenever you're trying to live an above average life. Because most people who are just living average, who are okay with living average and mediocre, they don't really move with a sense of urgency. You'll notice the people who are movers and shakers, they're always doing something. They're always getting something done. They just walk differently. They move a little bit faster. Sometimes they may even talk a little bit faster because of the urgency that's it's just a part of your mentality. That's the mentality we have. And so this is one of those books, man, this probably was the #1 life-changing book for me. And it's not a whole lot of tactical strategy things in here, but the mindset that it gives you. And I've heard other entrepreneurs say the same thing. Guys like Brandon Carter and other guys out there, other influencers mention this book as well. But game changer book. Book number 3, How Successful People Think. This is by John C. Maxwell. And what's crazy is back when I did that network marketing company, like I was talking to you guys about earlier, they bring in different speakers to speak to us. And because I was of like a higher level, I was in like the top 100 of like everybody inside the company, I was able to sit inside of a room where John C. Maxwell was speaking about leadership. And years later, I ended up buying this book. And one of the things that I really like about this book, How Successful People Think, he has so many different mindset shifts and mindset perspective shifts. The biggest thing for me though is growing up, I believe one of the things that I believe more parents should do is show their children how to think. Okay, show their children how to critically think. And I think that's why there's so many workers. And there's nothing wrong with being a worker or an employee, but most times people who are working and just got a day-to-day job or something like that, you're not really having to think a whole lot. And granted, you are doing some type of thinking, but people who make the most money, those are people who are having to think the most. Those are people who are having to think critically. And this book right here, it really opened my mind up to how important it is to have think time. How important it is to, take one day out the week or 2 days out the month, or, at least once a month, you need to set some time, prioritize it to just think and reflect. Hey, what can I do better with what I'm doing right now in my business or in my relationships or whatever it might be. And so that way, once you start asking yourself these types of questions, now you get better outcomes. most people don't get the outcomes that they want because they're not asking themselves good questions, and they don't even take the time to think about what questions they should be asking themselves. And so this is a powerful book, man. This is one that I revisit as well. I'll make more videos about books and things like that because that's something I enjoy doing. Even though I don't do it as much right now, I'll read a book if it's really relevant to what I'm doing right now in the stage of my life. And so it just has to be relevant. But this is a great book, How Successful People Think. Next book number 4, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is by Robert Kiyosaki. I want to throw this book in here because I believe every man should understand something about finances. You know, you don't have to be like a accountant or anything like that, but I'm a firm believer you should understand, you know, the difference between an asset and a liability. You know, your income versus your expenses. As you know, if you want to be able to accumulate wealth, you gotta have more money coming in than what's going out. If you're always spending more than you're making, man, you're not gonna be able to build wealth. And so this is one of those books that I believe every guy should read, no matter what age you're at. I feel like even as you get older, it's something that you can always go back inside this book and pull from. It's just one of them books. It even says it's like the #1 personal finance book of all time. And I don't know if that's marketing or not right there, but it's definitely a bestseller on Amazon.com for sure. And so grab this book for yourself as well as for your kids. This is a book that I would, if I had children, I'd have them read these books, okay? This is book number 5, The Way of the Superior Man. Listen, this book, I read this about maybe 2 years ago, and it really changed my life because up to that point, you know, I had been dating and, you know, I had been in relationships as well. And I really was never taught or understood how to just navigate my life while, you know, being able to have a woman. And not saying that I wasn't successful in the past, but it's one thing to just kind of go through life, you know, having experiences. It's another thing to have awareness of what you're doing, why you're doing it, what are the causes and effects of you doing certain things, you know, and understanding who's going to be a better partner for you versus just looking at any little pretty lady out there and saying to yourself, oh man, she looks nice, that's the one I want. That's not the way you want to live your life. And that's kind of how I was living my life. If she looked pretty, she was attractive, hey, you know, I'll talk to her, I'll get a number, I'll take her out. But now I understand there's other elements in there. There's other factors in there. And I want to understand, I want to make sure that I'm talking to a woman that works well with who I am. You know, I want to make sure that I'm talking to a feminine woman. I want to make sure that I'm talking to a woman that's submissive. You know, not somebody that's a pushover or that I'm walking all over or anything like that, but I value feminine energy. I value somebody who I can communicate with. And then the other thing about this book is that he talks about being purpose driven, you know, not putting a woman before your purpose. And I'm not saying that, you know, if you're married, if you're in a relationship, you should neglect your partner or anything like that. But I feel like every single man should have purpose in life, whether that be building a business, whether that be, you know, helping people. You gotta find something that just lights you up on a daily basis, or else you're just living your life day to day and you find yourself meeting a woman and you're pouring your entire self into her and you lose your sense of identity. And so these are just some of the things that the book talks about, living passionately and living purposeful, living a fulfilled life, and just knowing how to like navigate life with women. And so The Way of the Superior Man. Then book number 6, Psycho Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. This is about a guy, he was like a surgeon. And what happened was he would do plastic surgery on these people's faces. And they would always say, hey, I don't really see any changes. And you know, their personalities would reflect that nothing changed. And something that he started to discover was the self-image. And basically, long story short, I'll let you read it, but it's one of the most profound books ever. It's crazy how important it is to read this book. Like it's a book that I actually got on audiobook on Audible because I listen to it sometimes. That's how powerful it is, and that's how much I reflect back to it. But it helps you understand yourself. It helps you understand who you are as a person. It helps you become more self-aware, and ultimately it helps you find your true personality. It helps you find how to express yourself to other people. And so that way, when you're talking to people, it doesn't really feel like a disconnect. You know, have you ever just talked to somebody and you could just kind of feel like, man, they might be a little awkward, you know? But one of the things about this book, it really helps you come into your own personality and so much more. It's not just that, but just that's part of self-image, you know, understanding how you think about yourself on the inside. You're able to express that on the outside with what people see. When people talk to you or when people see you, you don't want there to be like a big disconnect. Sometimes when there's a big disconnect, it's like, okay, he looks like this, but I would have thought he would have been a little bit different. You know, and I know to a certain extent that's like people judging you, but that's what people do. People look at you and they're gonna make a judgment based on how we look. But, you know, most times if how they judge you and how they look at you, if it lines up, you know, if they see a guy who's, you know, has muscles, you know, and you're probably gonna think, okay, this guy might be somewhat outspoken. This guy, he's gonna be confident in himself, right? And not even all the time guys are outspoken if they got muscles or anything like that, but probably gonna have a little bit more confidence, right? Because he has muscles, he's in shape. That's one of the things that most people are gonna have, like far as a byproduct of getting in shape. They're going to be more confident and they're gonna know how to express themselves with that confidence. And so, great book, Psycho-Cybernetics. This is a book that I also read every other year just to kind of freshen up on it. Really good book. And then book number 7, No. That's it, No, by Jim Camp. The reason that I really like this book and that I put this on the list as well is because I believe every man should have some level of understanding with sales and negotiation. And this is how the world works. Whether you believe it or not, this is how the world works. It doesn't matter if you're in church. You know how sometimes you're in church and if you're into going to church or anything like that, they pass around that basket or that bucket for everybody to, you know, tithe. And, you know, if there's not a lot of money being put inside the bucket, hey, the pastor might say, hey, we're gonna take the bucket back around again, right? And then that's the pastor selling. Or he may say something, he may share a story to not necessarily persuade people in a bad way, but to get people to say, okay, let me go ahead and tithe a little bit more money, you know? And there's so many other areas. Let's say you want to get your children to do something and they're just being hard-headed. Your ability to sell and negotiate and communicate with your children, you can get them to do the things that you want them to do without, you know, having to whoop them or, you know, do anything crazy to them. You can just communicate with them because you understand how to sell and negotiate. These are powerful things. And even when it comes to dating, if you want to talk to a woman, you got to understand the things that she wants and desires. You got to understand what type of situations has she been at in the past. And so you know how to express that you understand what she's gone through, and you understand how to express things that she desires. The qualities that she desires in a man, you'll understand how to talk about those things as far as what you might have. You might not have every single thing. You might not have all those traits, but you'll understand how to position yourself when it comes to dating and, you know, even in business, how to sell. Same thing with your children and just relationships in general. I don't feel like this is a book just about sales. It's a book about just, he calls it the only negotiating system you need for work and home. And so this is one of the reasons I love this book. It really helps you just understand how to communicate with people really effectively, and for the lack of better words, like how to get the things that you want out of life. And so these are the 7 books. And remember how I told you earlier in the video, you don't have to read all these books right away. think about what book would be the most relevant for you in your life right now, and start reading that book and start applying those things right now. That's why I say that. You want to read books that you can actively start to implement and apply into your life, because it's going to stick with you longer. A lot of times what used to happen to me in the past, I would read books and I wasn't in a place to actively apply it. And so the information would just kind of, I'd have it just for a short period of time, but I wouldn't really retain it. Most times when we do things, when we read books, if we are applying those things as we read it, it's going to be a lot easier to retain it. And so that's one of the ways that I use books now. That's the way that I read books. And shoot, to be honest with you, some books I don't even read the entire book. I just go straight to the chapters that are most important and relevant to what I'm trying to solve, the problem I'm trying to solve, or what I'm trying to learn at that time. And so that's how I do it, because I want to be able to save time too. Like I don't want to just be reading a book, because sometimes you might be reading a book and it hasn't gotten to the point, and by the time it does get to the point, you burned out. You ready to go to sleep. I'm tired because I done read all these chapters that it was meaningless to me. And so that's why I say every book isn't always meant to be read from front to back. Like sometimes just go straight to that chapter that you know is going to be most meaningful for you. And so that way you can get the information and, save all that time and be on to the next thing. Go ahead and go apply it. So with that said, guys, if you found this helpful, be sure to drop me a like and comment any other topics you want me to talk about down in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel.